Okay, so over the years, I've seen that there's quite a bit of confusion around the flow of project management and how all the different aspects of project management flow together. If you deal with the PMI, you deal with a certain way, a certain flow. If you deal with Prince 2, you deal with a certain way. And if there's all these components and all these life cycles and all these knowledge areas and all these processes and process groups and process flows that comes together, that it's really difficult to figure out where everything or how everything fits together. So I've set up a little a diagram over the years that sort of helped me just to visualize the process of project management and how everything fits together. Just a disclaimer on this: remember, project management is not a hard science. It's not something that you can put in a box and say this is the process flow. I mean, that is exactly the problem that we're sitting with. So what I'm saying here is this is a nice place to start generically in terms of the flow of project management, right away from strategy to project execution and post-project analysis. But like I always say, what I always say is remember that all the different components that you see over here could be done at different time scales or different places within the organization. It's just nice to sort of get a benchmark or a process flow to put something out there so you can see where I can start with all of this. So everything starts with strategy. So you'll see there at the top there, everything starts with strategy. And strategy is the driving force for projects. So we always say that strategy is the key element to what necessitates a project at the end of the day. And that is that's being captured within the business case that we have. So the business case is the strategic driving force for a possible project. So I always say business case, pretty more specifically, is the problem statement or the pain point that the organization is sitting with that they would like to solve. So when you are sitting with a business case, we are dealing with a business case, you probably don't have a project yet. You probably don't know where you're going. You might have an idea. It's more a sense of what is the problem? I know what the problem is and I want to solve the problem. So what happens then out of the business case, you will identify a few possible projects or possible solutions for the business case, for the pain point, for the problem statement that you have in your business case. Business case in line with strategy. So out of that then you will go through a decision making process, you'll do some feasibility studies and you'll go, no, that one won't work, that one won't work, and then you'll go ahead with another project that might work. Remember, if it is on this list, if your project is on this list, it means that it is a possible solution. So I always say when you are going through a decision making process to decide which project to go ahead with, you are not going to decide whether or not you are going to, or whether a project will work or not. It's which project is the best project that you can take on. So that's the process that you take on there. Out of that flows the project brief, or the project charter sometimes is called. Now that is the formal trigger that they now is a project. So that is saying, guys, we did all this upfront stuff, we did some feasibility studies, we've got a business case, we know what the pain point is, we know we're in line with the strategy, but all of that stuff happens outside of the, let's say, the official project. So when the official project starts is at the moment in which the project brief is set out. Now remember, a project brief is an instruction from someone to someone else. So if you say the project brief, you say who's giving that? The client, the project sponsor gives that to who? It gives that to the project manager, the person who needs to now execute the project. So that's why I say it's the formal trigger that there's a project. So there's a few things that's in there that states what the project is, what the strategy is, what is the main outputs, the main goals, objectives that you want to get there, some framework that you want to work in, some timeline that you want to work with, but high level executive summary stuff over here. Now before we go into the project, I just want to go to this side. I want to say, but this is normally something that you don't really know in project management, where to pop in the organizational structuring, the organization, the integration with the organization and the project team. So what I've said is that it's a good place to pop it in there. It might happen before, it might happen over here, it might even happen while you are starting to scope for the project. But this is a good place to say, listen, I've got now an instruction over there that comes from the project sponsor that goes to the project manager. how good will that not be to say, at this stage, why don't I, the project sponsor or the organization, tells the project manager, listen man, this is your project team, you can use these guys, or other way around. The project manager says, okay, I've got the project brief, I know what the project is, these are the people I'm going to need for my project, will it be alright? Because remember, that comes from an organizational side. And that now again links to the structures that you have in organizations. So there we talk about the functional structure, the matrix structure, the peer project structure, and all of those, and that's how those come into play together there. And this over here, I say that's initiation stage, the big part of initiation, the upfront stuff, the before the project starts. Good. Now that you have issued the project brief, remember the project brief comes from the project sponsor to the project manager. There now is a project manager, and there now is a project in place. Remember, before that, that's not really there yet. Remember, that's the official starting point for the project. Now that we have that, we can go on and we can start planning for the project. Now remember, that's what it's all about. That's what project management is all about. It's about planning for a project. So we need to set up a plan. Now, I work with lots of project managers over the years, and the problem that I see is project managers are people who just want to start digging into the details, start solving problems. So you are going into a phase of saying, listen, I'm waiting for the project brief, That might even, you might even start before that, which is another problem that I have. But once you've got your project brief, you just start digging into the detail. Now there's a very specific flow in planning, which I feel very, very strong about. So in the process of planning, the first step would be to scope. So I always say, if you want to ask me what the project plan is, a project plan is three aspects. First you scope, then you schedule, and then you cost. Now, so that's a triangle. That's a project management triangle. The performance or the scope or the quality on the one side, then we've got the schedule or the time, and then we've got the cost on the other side. And the way I say we plan is we systematically go through the process of first figuring out what we need to do, then we figure out when are we going to do it, then we figure out how much it's going to cost, in that sequence. Now you can think about the problems that are going to occur if you start mixing those up. Now you start costing before you know exactly what you need to do or when you're going to do that, and then it's going to be an iterative process. And yes, planning is an iterative process, but it's just so much easier if you fixed the scope first. And that's the thing about the waterfall project management, is we say first we want to figure out what, traditional project management, and then using that as a basis to start scheduling, finish that, and then we know we can cost and we can go on with the rest. So when it comes to the plan part, you've got these three big blocks over there. You've got the scope formulation block, you've got the time management and schedule formulation block, and then you've got your costing and your budgeting over there. Good. So planning for scope, very important. How do you do that? Where do you start? Again, systematically we go through a process, and that's what's nice about project management. We've got these tools to assist us with this. So first we say, don't give me too much detail. I'm going to first just figure out or confirm the scope and the objectives of the project. And that's a two-way conversation between the client, project sponsor, and the project manager. So there's a process like, yes, thank you for my brief. I know now what the project is. Can I just confirm this is your goal and this is your main objectives? It's important to remember those, because that is going to be the basis of unpacking or later on breaking down our project. So what we do now that we know what the goal of the project is, we know what the objectives of the project is, we want to pause just for a second and we say, before we go and develop the detail of the finer part of the project, we first need to get some people involved as well. Now, I'm saying get people involved. It's not really getting them involved. It's also knowing who are the people that's involved with the project. Because, and this is a short version of this story, you can't do your scoping final because there's a lot of people that's going to have a big impact on the scope or the what you need to do for the project that you want on board before you start planning for that. So that is the beauty of it. If you know before you start planning or scoping who all the stakeholders are, you can use them or apply them to assist you with the process of scoping for the project. So that's why we say at this stage, before going into the detail of figuring out what needs to be done where, we say, but who are the project stakeholders? We analyze them a bit, we see how we're going to action them, and we use that information, yes, later on the project to say what are going to be extra activities or actions in the project, but also can't we apply them or get some information from them which will give us insight into the further scoping or the detail of the scoping. And then what we say is, okay, we are busy dealing with the stakeholders, and most of the actions that's relating to the stakeholder management process would be communication. So then I say, why don't we just pop in our communication there as well? Remember, we don't have final scope. We haven't dealt with the detail of the scope yet. But it's a good place to just fix maybe our communication lines, the way we're going to communicate, when. I would say a good communication plan is when, who say what, when, in what format or technology or whatever. So you can fix that, you get that in place. Then we say, now that I know what the main things are, what the sort of the goals and objectives of the project is, and I know what the stakeholders are, and I know management of them and communication in terms of them, I can go and I can start unpacking the detail of the project. And this over here is what we call the scope development. That's where you go into the finer details of what is included in the project. And that's your whole mission with when you're scoping, is what is included. What is the nuts and the bolts and the detail of what I need to produce as a project manager at the end of the day. So we do that in a systematic way. We go and we say, what is included in the project? Remember, we started at a high level. We say we've got the goals and objectives. So you can say, what is the goal? The goal is there. What is it? Supported by some objectives. And then you can take that further by unpacking and say, what is now included in these objectives? And what is included in those objectives? What is included in the components? What is included in the subcomponents? What is included in the sub-subcomponents or deliverables or work packages or activities right at the bottom of that? So we say, first we say what is included, that's the I. Then we say what's excluded, that's the E. Then we say what are the assumptions around those, that's the A. And then we say, are there any risks that's linked to this? And then we use that R, the risk part in the scope development phase. We use that as a sort of an entrance point to say, but now that we've got scope going, or figuring out what the scope is, we can now link risk to that, not risk, we can identify risk to that, and we can do the risk analysis process over there. And that's a nice way or a nice place to start your risk identification process in project management. Good. Out of that flow your work breakdown structure. I can't say really out of that. That's really, the work breakdown structure really comes from the beginning of the project. Sometimes even either conceptualizing, you say you put up a work breakdown structure and start drafting something out. But this is a good place to go and fix that hard fix, to say this is the work breakdown structure for my project. And out of that, not really, out of that, in line with that, in line of my scope development, you set up a scope of works, which is your contract, the detailed narrative contract between who? Between the project manager and the project sponsor or client, to say this is going to be included in the project. Remember, that's not the project plan, it's just the scope. It's just something that we fix. Then you say, out of all of this, you can say, I'm coming out on the other side with activities to do. So I always say, what is the basic definition of a project? It's doing a bunch of activities. So out of the whole scoping process, you figure out what you need to do, and that becomes your activities for your project. Just enough activities to reach your goal. Now this is where I say it starts to become fun. If you fixed your scope for your project, the rest downstream, and if you put really the trouble into doing this well, downstream it becomes just so much easier, because now this is fixed. You've got an activity base, so it's packed in these little blocks of what you're going to deliver, and now you can go, you can schedule those in to a Gantt chart or to a critical path method scheduling tool or anything. You can say, out of that now I know what I need to do, and my scheduling part gives me an idea of when I'm going to do that. The output of that will be a Gantt chart or some schedule. That then flows into your costing phase of your planning, in which you now, because it's easy, now you know exactly what, you know exactly when, so you've got time linked to what. Now you've got activities linked to time. So you've done the hard work now. You've done the planning, so you know what you're scoping. You know what when you're going to do that. So now you can just link that to the cost. So we remember we've got activity-based costing. We can now put that into a baseline. We've got our Gantt chart. So now we've got not only what we're going to do, we know what we're going to do when, and we know when we're going to incur the costs. So that's the project baseline we're talking about. And this is a big milestone in the project, because now suddenly we've got the plan in place. So everything's in place. So if you talk about big phases or yeah, phases within project management, you can go and you can say initiating, yes, finished, ticked off. Planning, yes, finished, ticked off. And now we need to execute. And I almost want to say the volume of space that the sort of the diagram is taking on the diagram. It almost represents the energy that you have to put in. If you put enough energy into planning, into this big block, then the executing just becomes so much easier and better. So in the execution, you start monitoring and controlling. You need to figure out how you are doing in relation to your plan, and you need to control that back to your plan or change your plan if need be. So we're talking over there, we're talking about change management, structural change management. We're talking about reporting. We're talking about earned value management, making sure that you do what the project plan says you have to do. That then goes into the project closure phase, and there we do all our post-project analysis, our evaluation of the project team, the suppliers, the subcontractors, the contractors, the consultants, and we wrap up this whole thing and we say, good, Bob's your uncle, the project is finished, we can go on. Now this is a good representation for me, just to put something in perspective in terms of the flow. Now again, just for example, what I talk about in the beginning with just the baseline, this is just something that you can put on that you can put down to say, but this is a good place to start, but it doesn't mean everything's always the same. It could be that within your feasibility studies and decision-making processes that you have up here, remember, initiation, before project brief, we haven't got a project yet, we don't know what the project is going to be, but it could be that in those studies, there's also a lot of, let's call it scoping, included already. So a lot of this work might have been done there already, or even some costing, or even some scheduling, or even some way of something like stakeholder management could have happened there already. So remember, this is just a nice flow to put these, if we do project management training, if we do execute projects, that you know where you are, and that you know in which blocks all the stuff that we talk about fits. So once you've got this, you can apply this to any project, and you can also start changing this to your organization to sort of fit this to how you guys are doing things, or when it fits you to do the best.